Good morning. Today's Bible reading comes from Exodus 21 through 23. So let's get into it. These are the laws that you are to place before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he will serve 6 years. The 7th year, he goes free for nothing. If he came in single, he leaves single. If he came in married, he leaves with his wife. If the master gives him a wife, and she gave him sons and daughters, the wife and the children stay with the master, and he leaves by himself. But suppose the slave should say, I love my master and my wife and children. I don't want my freedom. Then his master is to bring him before God and to a door or doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl, a sign that he is a slave for life. When a man sells his daughter to be a handmaid, she doesn't go free after 6 years like the men. If she doesn't please her master, her family must buy her back. Her master doesn't have the right to sell her to foreigners, since he broke his word to her. If he turns her over to his son, he has to treat her like a daughter. If he marries another woman, she retains all her full rights to meals, clothing, and marital relations. If he won't do any of these 3 things for her, she goes free for nothing. If someone hits another and death results, the penalty is death. But if there is no intent to kill, if it was an accident, an act of God, I'll set aside a place to which the killer can flee for refuge. But if the murder was premeditated, cunningly plotted, then drag the killer away, even if it's from my altar, to be put to death. If someone hits father or mother, the penalty is death. If someone kidnaps a person, the penalty is death, regardless of whether the person has been sold or is still held in possession. If someone curses father or mother, the penalty is death. If a quarrel breaks out and one hits the other with a rock or a fist and the injured one doesn't die, but it's continued to bed and then later gets better and can get about on a crutch, the one who hit him is also in the clear, except to pay for the loss of time and make sure of complete recovery. If the slave owner hits a slave, male or female, with a stick and the slave dies on the spot, the slave must be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or two, he's not to be avenged. The slave is the owner's property. When there is a fight and in the fight a pregnant woman is hit so that she miscarries but is not otherwise hurt, the one responsible has to pay whatever the husband demands in compensation. But if there is further damage, then you must give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. If the slave owner hits the eye of a slave or handmaid and ruins it, the owner must let the slave go free because of the eye. If the owner knocks out the tooth of the male or female slave, the slave must be released and go free because of the tooth. If an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox must be stoned. The meat cannot be eaten, but the owner of the ox is in the clear. But if the ox has a history of goring and the owner knew it and did nothing to guard against it, then if the ox kills a man or woman, the ox is to be stoned and the owner given the death penalty. If a ransom is agreed upon instead of death, he must pay it in full as redemption for his life. If a son or daughter is gored, the same judgment holds. If it is a slave or a handmaid the ox gores, 30 shekels of silver is to be paid to the owner and the ox stoned. If someone uncovers a cistern or digs a pit and leaves it open and an ox or donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must pay whatever the animal is worth to its owner, but can keep the dead animal. If someone's ox injures a neighbor's ox and the ox dies, they must sell the live ox and split the price. They must also split the dead animal. But if the ox had a history of goring and the owner knew it and did nothing to guard against it, the owner must pay an ox for an ox, but can keep the dead animal. If someone steals an ox or a lamb or slaughters and sells it, the thief must pay 5 cattle in place of the ox and 4 sheep in place of the lamb. If the thief is caught while breaking in and is hit hard and dies, there is no blood guilt. But if it happens after daybreak, there is blood guilt. A thief must make full restitution for what is stolen. The thief who is unable to pay is to be sold for his thieving. If caught and red-handed with the stolen goods, and the ox or donkey or lamb is still alive, the thief pays double. If someone grazes livestock in a field or vineyard, but lets them loose so they graze in someone else's field, restitution must be made from the best of the owner's field or vineyard. If fire breaks out and spreads to the brush so that the sheaves of grain, or the standing grain, or even the whole field is burned up, whoever started the fire must pay for the damages. If someone gives a neighbor money or things for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief is caught. The thief, if caught, must pay back double. If the thief is not caught, the owner must be brought before God to determine whether the owner was the one who took the neighbor's goods. In all cases of stolen goods, whether oxen, donkeys, sheep, clothing, or anything in fact missing of which someone says, "That's mine," both parties must come before the judges. The one the judges pronounce guilty must pay double to the other. If someone gives a donkey or ox or a lamb or any kind of animal to another for safekeeping and it dies, or is injured or is lost, and there is no witness, an oath before God must be made between them to decide whether one has laid hands on the property of the other. The owner must accept this and no damages are assessed. But if it turns out it was stolen, the owner must be compensated. If it has been torn by wild beasts, the torn animal must be brought in as evidence. No damages have to be paid. If someone borrows an animal from a neighbor and it gets injured or dies, while the owner is not present, he must pay for it. But if the owner was with it, he doesn't have to pay. If the animal was hired, the payment covers the loss. If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the marriage price and marry her. If her father absolutely refuses to give her away, the man must still pay the marriage price for the virgins. Don't let a sorceress live. Anyone who has sex with an animal gets the death penalty. Anyone who sacrifices to God or other than God alone must be put to death. Don't abuse or take advantage of strangers. You, remember, were once strangers in Egypt. Don't mistreat widows or orphans. If you do and they cry out to me, you can be sure I'll take them most seriously. I'll show my anger and come raging among you with the sword, and your wives will end up widows and your children orphans. If you lend money to my people, to any of the down and out among you, don't come down hard on them and gouge them with interest. If you take your neighbor's coat as security, give it back before nightfall. It may be your neighbor's only covering. What else does a person have to sleep in? And if I hear the neighbor crying out from the cold, I'll step in. I'm compassionate. Don't curse God and don't damn your leaders. Don't be stingy as your wine vats fill up. Dedicate your firstborn sons to me. The same with your cattle and sheep. They are to stay for 7 days with their mother. Then give them to me. Be holy for my sake. Don't eat mutilated flesh you find in the fields. Throw it to the dogs. Don't pass on malicious gossip. Don't link up with a wicked person and give corrupt testimony. Don't go along with the crowd in doing evil, and don't fudge your testimony in a case just to please the crowd. And just because someone is poor, don't show favoritism in a dispute. If you find your enemy's ox or donkey loose, take it back to him. If you see the donkey or someone who hates you lying helpless under its load, don't walk off and leave it. Help it up. When there is a dispute concerning your poor, don't tamper with justice. Do them. Stay clear of false accusations. Don't contribute to the death of innocent and good people. I don't let the wicked off the hook. Don't take bribes. Bribes blind perfectly good eyes and twist the speech of good people. Don't take advantage of a stranger. You know what it's like to be a stranger. You were strangers in Egypt. Sow your land for 6 years and gather in its crops. But in the 7th year leave it alone and give it a rest, so that your poor may eat from it. What they leave, let the wildlife have. Do the same with your vineyards and olive groves. Work for 6 days and rest the 7th on your ox and donkey. May rest and your servant, and migrant workers may have time to get their needed rest. Listen carefully to everything I tell you. Don't pay attention to other gods. Don't so much as mention their names. 3 times a year you are to hold a festival for me. Hold the spring festival of unraised bread, when you eat unraised bread for 7 days at the time set for the month of Abib, as I commanded you. That was the month you came out of Egypt. No one should show up before me empty-handed. Hold the summer festival of harvest when you bring in the first fruits of all your work in the fields. Hold the autumn festival of the ingathering at the end of the season, when you bring in the year's crops. 3 times a year all your males are to appear before the Master, God. Don't offer the blood of a sacrifice to me with anything that has yeast in it. Don't leave the fat from my festival offering out overnight. Bring the choice first produce of the year to the house of your God. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. Now get yourselves ready. I'm sending my angel ahead of you to guard you in your travels, to lead you to the place that I've prepared. Pay close attention to him. Obey him. Don't go against him. He won't put up with your rebellions because he's acting on my authority. But if you obey him and do everything I tell you, I'll be an enemy to your enemies. I'll fight those who fight you. When my angel goes ahead of you and leads you to the land of Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, I'll clear the country of them. So don't worship or serve their gods. Don't do anything they do, because I'm going to wipe them right off the face of the earth and smash their sacred phallic pillars to bits. But you serve your God, and he'll bless your food and your water. I'll get rid of the sickness among you. There won't be any miscarriages nor barren women in your land. I'll make sure you live full and complete lives. I'll send my terror on ahead of you and throw those peoples you're approaching into a panic. All you'll see of your enemies is the back of their necks, and I'll send despair on ahead of you. It will push the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites out of your way. I won't get rid of them all at once, lest the land grow up in weeds and the wild animals take over. Little by little, I'll get them out of there while you have a chance to get your crops going and make the land your own. I will make your borders stretch from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates River. I'm turning everyone living in that land over to you. Go ahead and drive them out. Don't make any deals with them or their gods. They are not to stay in the same country with you, lest they get you to sin by worshiping their gods. Be aware, that's a huge danger. And that is it for today's Bible reading. As always, get in touch with God today, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.